I want to welcome everybody to our Wednesday night Bible study, whether you're here or accessing us online. We're a few weeks into our study of Christian and finances. But before we get into that discussion, let's have a word of prayer together. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this opportunity to study your word and help us learn more how to better manage our finances according to the teachings of your word, and be with all that teach tonight. They might do so effectively, and their students might learn much and grow closer to you. We thank you for all the blessings you give us and how much you love us. All these things we ask in Christ's name. Amen. There's that. Okay. So last week we talked about first self-control, which is the easy way of controlling yourself, but that's an important way to get a control on your finances and a lot of things in your life. It's self-control. We talked about needs and wants. David and I were talking about like a car is a need around here, but maybe if you live in New York City, it's almost a burden. I don't know if you've ever visited there, but it costs like $70, $80 to park your car. And that's one of the big struggles people have, is what you do with your car. But a new car is not a need. Does anybody remember, just see if you're paying attention last week, what car was I going to buy when I got out of college that didn't? What kind? Do you remember? Ferrari. And remember I said I bought a picture while I was cleaning out our garage? And looky there. That's the picture I got when I was in college, when I was convinced that was the car I was going to have. Anybody care to guess what a new Ferrari costs right now? The cheapest one was $275, and you can get one all the way up to $675. Now, if I'd bought that straight out of college, I could have gotten it for $45,000, which is still way, way, way more than I made getting out of college with a college degree in computer science. But anyway, then we got to talking about debt, and that's where we're going to plunge back into tonight. And I kind of jumped through this part a little bit last time, so I'm going to go back and hit it. Plus, Ben had some really good points in the sermon Sunday, so I borrowed one or two of them and kind of folded it into the lesson tonight. So the first, obviously, is God. Philippians 4:13, which is a well-known verse to most of us. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Or Hebrews chapter 13, verse 5 and 6, which Bryant went over a few weeks ago in his study with us. Let your conduct be without covetousness. Be content with such things as you have, for he himself has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me? So God won't leave us or forsake us. And he is my helper. So we can ask him for help when we need it. And this is the part that when Ben read this, I thought, I've got to use this in Psalms chapter 116, the 116th Psalm, verses 1 and 2. I love the Lord because he has heard my voice and my supplications, because he's inclined his ear to me. Therefore, I will call upon him as long as I live. And I just think that's one of the greatest things about our God. He listens to us. You know, I talked about inclining his ear. That means he's listening intently to us. Now, I can tell you I'm not a good listener. Donna can tell you that even more than I can. But I'm an introvert, and if you know anything about introverts, like when Adam talks about that, it's an effort just to have a conversation. Now, you ever talk to somebody and you see their eyes start to glaze over, they're not listening to you, or they start looking around, or worst things, they whip out their phone and start doing this. That's pretty bad, isn't it? They're not listening to you. But isn't it comforting to know that God listens to us when we pray? And I've had people even say, well, you should only pray for God about the really big things in your life that you need help with, but I don't agree with that. Because one thing is, something's not a big deal to you, might be a big deal to me. And God wants to hear us. We're his children. And I think what I should learn about listening, and the example I think of God and us, is when my granddaughter Lucy's talking to me about something, do you think I'm listening intently to her? Of course I am. I mean, and she might draw out a really long story, explain to Granddad what she did today or what she wants to do or whatever about some cartoon she's watching. But I'm listening to her, all ears, all attention. And that's the way God listens to his children. And to me, that's just an amazing thing to think that God would listen to me specifically when I have something in my life that I need help with. All right. Other Christians can help us. Galatians 6:2. And this is something I don't think we do as much as we should, is lean on each other. I mean, we're a family, and we should help each other when we need it. All right. Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. We can give advice. Some of us older ones might be able to help younger ones. We've gone through things in our lives, and we should have picked up some wisdom along the way with that. So we should be able to help, give advice or, try to help people, pray for each other. And finally, counselors, financial counselors. Proverbs 19:20. Listen to counsel and receive instruction that you may be wise in your latter days. And I'm talking about good counselors. There's good counselors and bad counselors, just like there's good and bad of every profession on earth. You don't want somebody that's just trying to pitch you a product, that's trying to fit you like a square peg into a round hole, if you ever heard that phrase. You want them that tries to understand all about your financial life, wants to make sure that you understand it yourself. You want a counselor with the heart of a teacher that doesn't make you feel stupid for asking questions, that wants to make sure you completely understand. If you ever go to a counselor and they start trying to push you away and they just, I know what's best for you, don't worry about it, leave. And in this day and age, we can get all sorts of advice from the internet. You can get blogs and podcasts and even books and websites. So there's all sorts of places that we can get advice and information. Now, I will tell you, and I think this is more true of men than ladies, is we don't always want to do that. We always think we know everything, or we don't want to ask for advice, but that's something that we should do, because Proverbs talks about that. So, let's start with steps to get out of debt. Obviously, stop borrowing. Put down that shovel. You dug yourself a big old hole, right? That's the first thing you do is quit digging that hole deeper. Take your credit cards and put them where you can't use them. Call your credit card company and say, I want this card closed to new charges. I've known of people that put their credit cards in a glass of water, freeze the glass, put it in the refrigerator. Makes it really hard to get to and do anything with it. But that seems almost obvious, but put down the shovel. Quit digging you a deeper hole. All right. Take an account of all your debts. Make sure you know what things you owe on. Write them down. Interest rate, account balance, when the payment's due, so you know what you're up against. Sometimes you might have even forgotten about something you owe on. Write it all down. Look at your old bank statements, credit union statements, whatever. Get a handle on what you owe. And finally, get caught up. Your first priority is to get caught up on any you're behind on if you can. I don't know if you've ever paid one late and seen the nice little late fee they tack on. It's quite significant. Or they'll raise the interest rate. They're already usually pretty bad. But if you don't pay, they jack up your interest rates. Take every cent you can find somewhere to at least get caught up to start with. I knew somebody personally. He had a credit card at a local hardware store. And he inevitably would pay it one day late. $30. But guess what? $25 of that was ended up being a late fee. So you're getting $5 against the debt. Just one day, because they wouldn't bother to pay it on time. So again, those are the initial things you want to do. All right. The debt snowball. Now, if you've ever heard anything about Dave Ramsey, this is one of the big things he teaches, is a debt snowball. If you ever built a snowman, I built one with Lucy a few weeks ago, and we had a ball. But you start out with that little bit of snow, and you just roll, and it gets big enough where you can make a snowman. I always think it's Bugs Bunny, if you've ever seen a Looney Tunes cartoon, where he's on top of this big mountain of snow, and he drops a little piece, and it rolls all the way down, takes out either Elmer Fudd or Yosemite Sam at the bottom with a big old snowball. That's the principle here. So how do you do that? Put your debts in order, smallest to largest. And we're going to attack that smallest one as hard as we can, aggressively, with whatever you can do to knock out that first debt, whatever it is. Tax refunds, bonuses, stimulus payments, whatever you can get. I remember last summer, I don't know if you got this, but we did. Insurance company actually gave you a little rebate because people weren't driving as much. Now, it wasn't a gigantic amount of money, but it was enough you could at least throw it against that first debt you had. Look at your bank statement again for little things you can knock out. What I think of is subscriptions to stuff. You start subscribing to this thing, like maybe you want to get this extra channel, like, there's all these channels now that you can sign up for to kind of replace your cable. And I'm not talking about the big ones, I'm talking about them little bitty $9 or $10 ones. Or I've seen this thing, and I did this. They sell these boxes every month that you get this cool stuff in, like ladies might do clothes or makeup. Well, they had one for the Cardinals, and I think they do one for every team. And every month they send me a box and have like a cool T-shirt, and I got a Cardinal wallet. But then I started piling up junk, and the last thing I need is to pile up, right, hun, in my room more junk, bobbleheads and baseballs, and so I finally stopped. I'll give you an example of another one. When we were the boys were probably 9 or 10, we would all go to this place once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks. Anybody remember that place? Right over by the mall was one. It was our ritual. I mean, we rented DVDs from there. Or actually, that's not true. We rented VCR tapes. If anybody remembers those, you have to be my age. Remember that kind. If you're young, you may have no idea what I'm talking about. But they would have 50 of these tapes and DVDs piled up that you would borrow. But then in the 2000s, they came out with this amazing thing that you could go online and get them delivered to your house. You put in your list of stuff you want, you get one, you watch it, you keep it as long as you want. You don't have those late fees. If you were like a minute late here, they slapped a big old late fee on you. And of course, that was this company, Netflix. The interesting thing is, just throw this in, I was listening to a podcast for one of the guys who founded Netflix, and he said they went to Blockbuster and tried to get them to buy them out, and they wouldn't do it. And Netflix ended up being one of the big reasons that there's one Blockbuster video left in America. I think it's Louisiana. And used to, they were everywhere, but they put them out of business. So we stayed with it for a few years, and they went more from DVDs to online streaming. And there were some shows we watched, but they slowly started migrating to them little one-off subscription things. And basically, there were only 2 shows we watched on there. And I hope you know those are 2 classics. If you don't know what they are, you need to rectify that quickly on your TV viewing. Those are 2 classics. But they went away from showing those. Now, I tried to watch some of the Netflix original, whatever they call it. I got about halfway through an episode of something. I don't even remember what it was, and it was so vulgar I had to give it up. So we hung on, and finally I just said, let's get rid of it. So we dropped it, even though we'd been on it for probably 16 or 17 years. We dropped the subscription. So I tell you all that to tell you, look through and see if there's stuff that you're subscribed to that maybe you've forgotten about. Maybe you were listening to Spotify and you wanted to get that premium where you don't get all those little commercials interspersed in there, and you thought, it's only $5 a month. Boom, and then you forget about it. Or you sign up for where you can have 30 days free. Well, guess what? In then 30 days, you forget. And they don't bother a lot of times to say, you're running out. They just start charging you. So check that out. So once you pay off that first debt, you add that payment to the payment of the next debt. And I'm going to give you an example. All right, and let me say this. I can get on a roll talking, and this is going to be more technical in the next few lessons. If I'm not explaining something well, do this, yell, say stop, re-explain that, and I will. Don't be afraid to do that. All right, let's say you got a credit card. It has $1,000 on it, and it's a $50 a month payment. You bought some furniture on what I called the no plan, right? No money down, no interest, no payments. But you let that go too long, and now you got to pay it. So it's $150 a month. Then you got a car that's $10,000 a month. $10,000 total and $450 a month. So what you do is you work on that credit card as hard as you can, trying to pay that thing off. Scrape every dollar you can find to get on there. Once you pay that 50 off, the $1,000 is gone. You add 50 to the 150 of the next debt. Now you're paying 200 on that furniture. Work as hard as you can, pay that off. Add that 150 to the 450. You're paying 200 plus 450 is 650. Now, let me go back and make one more statement. That doesn't mean you don't pay on your other debts. You don't say, I'm only paying this one. You got to at least pay the minimums on other stuff, because remember that late fee and all the penalties. So you start out and you got this, right? You can even see you got that little marble, right? All right, let's say you pay that off, and I'll go to the next example if I can find it. Now you're up to that. Okay. Then I borrowed this from Lucy. You go to that, and you're building up. See, it's getting bigger. That's how the snowball works. All right. You get up to this. And then finally, you get to that last one. You're up to one of these. Right? I mean, it keeps piling up. You think each time you're adding more to the payment, and you're knocking out bit by bit what you're doing. I won't throw that to Jim. All right, I'm going to throw this out there. It has nothing to do with the lesson, but it's an interesting thing I thought of. If you ever listen to John Calipari's show after a Kentucky ball game, you don't realize what he's doing while he's being interviewed. I've been to games at Rupp, and you can stay and watch it. But what he's doing the whole time is people have bought basketballs. And the whole time he's talking, you don't realize people are throwing them to him, and he's signing them. And you have to buy a special basketball. You can't use this one. They sell ones at Rupp that have a white area that you can sign, and that's all he'll sign. But he points to people in the stands, and it's amazing to me that he can catch those balls, sign them, and throw them back. As Ed Steger said, that's free of charge for you to know. It has nothing to do with the lesson, except I wouldn't buy a ball going into Rupp. I'd buy one before I got there because it'd be cheaper. So I'd at least do that. All right, but anyway, this isn't something that's going to happen overnight. You can't think, I'm going to get out of debt in 6 months. You know, it takes a long time sometimes to get to where you are, and it takes a long time to get out of it. So you need that self-control, that patience we talked about. And it'd be hard. We did this, and it took us several years to pay off some stuff we had, but it worked. And I can tell you there is not many more gratifying feelings than to get that all paid off. So you have to hang in there. But nobody said it would be easy or fun, but you can do it. We did it. So I talked about this last time when I was doing the meddling. I won't go into it as hard as I did last week, so I think y'all heard enough about it. But this is a unique thing. You know, I looked to be sure, and there were stimulus payments in George W. Bush days, but they were nothing like they are now for most people. Of course, you give because you've been prospered, right? That's the first thing. Second thing, set up that initial emergency fund. You know, we talked about having a little bit of money spare. And I told you how I'd seen surveys where over half the people in America couldn't handle a $1,000 bill if it showed up. So you want that money stuck away for an emergency. You know, an emergency is not something goes on sale you want, or your friends are going on a weekend trip you want to go to. It's like if the alternator in your car goes out. Now, maybe some of you can fix that. I can't. Maybe your roof develops a leak, refrigerator goes out, you get up one morning with a toothache, or even worse, your child gets up with a toothache. Sure nice to have that there, so that way you don't have to borrow more money, or you don't have to go to a payday lender or something like that to get that taken care of. And of course, you can hit that debt snowball with it. Try to get up that ladder, you know, go for that little marble, maybe get up to that baseball or that little bouncy ball or whatever I showed you. Now, what I thought of is this helps you set up a good foundation. And I immediately thought of a parable, right? What do you think of when you see that, right? Little kid's song, Matthew 7. And kids love to sing this song. And I sing it with Lucy. I'll just tell you, we enjoy it. Matthew 7, verse 24. Therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken them to a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain descended, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it did not fall, for it was founded on the rock. And this, of course, is talking about basing our lives on the teachings of Christ and of God's Word. But it stresses the importance of a good foundation. And with your finances, you have to have a good foundation too, or you end up with the next verses. But everyone who hears these sayings of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain descended, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it fell, and great was it fall. And of course, the kids love that splat thing at the end. They always laugh. But it's a good visual. The song's a good visual example of this parable and the importance of a good foundation in your spiritual life, but also your financial life. If you don't have at least a little savings and working down your debt, it's going to be very hard to succeed financially in your life at all. So that's that good foundation that you're building. So I've got a few more suggestions here to help. Check your credit report and credit score. And you might say, no, whoa, wait a minute. Credit means borrowing, doesn't it? Why on earth would I care about that? Well, let's talk about that. Those are two websites. The first one is annualcreditreport.com. You can get every year a free copy of your report from the three main credit bureaus, and I wrote them down because I always forget them: Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. Now, it will show you the current debts you have, like what you're paying monthly on. It'll show ones you paid off. It's always good to look at that so you make sure that, one, you know all your debts, and two, make sure there's not something on there you're not expecting. Some medical debt you thought you paid off, or some credit card you thought you paid off, and there it is still sitting there. You can get that looked at. Now, that creditkarma.com will allow you to know your credit score. And you might say, well, why do I need a credit score? I don't borrow money. But a lot of things are based on the credit score that don't really have anything to do with debt. Your insurance, it plays into that some. Your car insurance and your home insurance. Why? I'm not sure. I guess some actuary proved that people with better credit scores are less risky. I don't know. My in-laws, who never borrow money, have never had a credit card in their life, their insurance agent actually recommended they get a card and charge something to it every month and pay it off to build their credit score, because they had what's called a thin file, if you've ever heard of that. That means you don't have a credit score. And they do this now. Now, when you get a new cell phone plan, guess what they're going to look at? Credit score. The one I ran to that struck me as odd, but I realized later why they did it, was when my mom passed away and we went to the funeral home. And I don't know if you've ever had to do that, where you go and you hammer out how it's going to go and who's going to speak, and you go to I hate to call it this, the coffin room, and you pick out what casket you want to use. And then they said, how are you going to pay for this? And we were waiting for Mom's life insurance to come in, so they said, well, you can have up to 30 days. Well, somebody had to sign something promising that was going to happen, and it was me. Well, the guy leaves the room for like 5 or 10 minutes, and I don't know what he's up to, but what I find out is he comes in and goes, oh, your credit score looks good. We can let you do this. I would have never thought that, but they had to check it because they didn't want to say you can have 30 days if they didn't believe I would pay them no matter what. So it's something to keep up with. Credit Karma is a good one. And it will even let you know if something shows up strange on your credit report. Did you do this? And let you know. And that's a good thing to know too sometimes, is somebody's done something, you've heard of identity theft. Well, it can happen, and this is one of the ways you can find out if somebody's been messing with your credit. All right, budget. We'll talk about that one more at length in the next lesson. We may get to that a little bit tonight. Work up a budget. It'll help you get control of your finances and where you can cut costs. Simply commit to get out of debt. I'm going to do this. It's important to me. Resolve purpose in your heart. We talked about Daniel a few weeks ago. You remember when he went and he was in the Babylonian palace, he resolved he was not going to defile himself with the king's food no matter what. Well, getting out of debt means that. You're going to resolve to do this no matter what. All right. Go to a cash basis. Now, my sons, I don't think carry any cash on them at all, hardly at all. But it's a good way to, keep you from spending as much. There's a lot more pain when you reach in that wallet and whip out a 20 than there is if you just take that card and go. We took Lucy to this new game arcade thing, and guess what? They don't even take coins in the machine anymore. You know what you have to do? You buy a card and you put money on it, and guess what? I'd say you spend more money that way because you don't feel the pain. You're just. And there's been studies that show that I think you spend like 25% more money when you swipe cards than when you use cash. And we'll talk about that a little more later too when we get to the budget. But let's say all that stuff doesn't work. Well, so let's go on to the stronger measures. Sometimes you can negotiate a credit card interest rate. I say sometimes. It's worth a shot. Sometimes you can threaten to do. Have you ever heard the term surf a credit card? Does anybody know what that means? That means you threaten to move your balance to another credit card. Sometimes they'll cut your rate. It's worth a try. Cut your expenses to the bone. I can tell you, this is just a personal thing to make you see this in your mind. I've embarrassed many a relative and friend when we go out to eat at a steakhouse because my favorite steak is a T-bone. And when I get all the meat on it, guess what I do? I pick up that bone and I gnaw on it in a restaurant. And I had a guy I worked with, and he'd go, "Don't gnaw on your bone." I said, "That's where the best meat's, right up there." But I was wanting to get every bit of meat off that bone. And it's the same way here. Maybe you've got to cut your expenses down to the minimum. Maybe you've got to drop your cable, which, that sounds awful. I can't watch my ball games. I can't watch this show. Your streaming service, I got to drop my YouTube TV or my Hulu or my Disney Plus. That might be rough if you have kids, I can't get rid of that. But, don't eat out. That's a hard one sometimes. Don't eat out. Don't go to the movies. Cut the things out that you can. Now, then you might have to go stronger than that. Sell an expensive item. Usually talking about a car. Maybe you have something else like a boat or a Sea-Doo or something like that. Usually we're talking about a car. I can remember when I was getting out of college, the longest term you get on a car was 48 months. They'd never go further. You know how the longest one is now? 84 months. 7 years of paying on a car. The issue is the car is probably the second most expensive thing you're ever going to buy in your life, next to a house. And the problem with that car, it's different than that house. What happens the moment you drive that car off the parking lot? To appreciate, it starts losing value. If you turned right around and sold it back to them, you'd lose money. It goes down in value. So the rule of thumb that I've heard is if you can't pay off a car in 2 years by going to this aggressive payment plan, you should consider selling it. But the problem you may have is you may be what's called upside down on the car, and you owe more on it than it's worth. So then you've got to try and sell the car and come up with the money to pay that difference and get you what's called a beater, if you've ever heard that. A little cheap car. In our life, Donna brought into our marriage, was it a 78 or 79 Olds Cutlass? 79. We drove that car till it had 210,000 miles on it, and it worked fine. Now, it wasn't, and I'll talk a minute about another thing about the car, but, I drove it to work. It was a 15-mile round trip to USAC, so it wasn't that big a deal. You ought to look up Dave Ramsey's story about the beater he drove that he called Big Red because he wanted his wife to have the better car, and so I gave him a car, and he talked about how when he would drive, the liner would poof up into the air and poof back down, and he was pulling up into his business, and all these people with their nice cars would look at him funny, but he was willing to take that to get out of debt. So, additional job overtime. No, we don't really want to do that necessarily. And you don't want to do it forever, but maybe long enough to at least get started on that debt snowball, start that first, debt, paying it off. Your pizza delivery or work weekends or Uber, Lyft. But really, if you could find something that plays off your current skill set that you work at, that's the best way to do it. When we were trying to pay off our house, I did a lot of computer work on the side. I designed websites, I did computer security, and to tell you how long ago it was, I was helping people update their computer systems to be Y2K compliant. I don't even like to think that was 21 years ago, but I did that. And we kept a piece of paper on our refrigerator, and every month we'd make a payment, we'd write down how much we had left owed. And I tell you how happy I was the day that we wrote a zero on there and that house was gone. I can tell you, and I can embarrass Jonathan because he's not here, that we went to our standard celebratory place, which was Whaler's Catch. And Jonathan does an excellent Captain Crab, or something. What was it? Crab Man. When he goes, then you'll have to ask him about his impersonation. He's always made me laugh. He would take like a lobster claw and pull his sleeve up and stick the claw out like this. Looked like he was, and it was hilarious. But fortunately, he's not here for me to embarrass him on that one. All right. So we've talked about that, but let's talk about something else. We're going to talk about loans and debt, loaning to other people. Loaning money to family or friends. And we read this verse last time, but let's go back to it to help make our point of Proverbs 22:7. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. It makes things very awkward. I've loaned money to family and friends, and it makes things awkward in your relationship. You remember we talked about in Hamlet, Polonius telling his son Laertes, neither a borrower nor a lender be, for loan both lose money and friend. Well, you lose a really good friend by loaning them money. I can remember reading that Abraham Lincoln had a letter that he wrote to some relative about why he wouldn't loan him money, because he thought it would destroy their relationship. You know, you see that person eating out, and you say, well, now wait a minute, you owe me money. Why couldn't you have given me that to pay back your loan? If you want to help people with money, which we should do at times, just give it to them. Don't expect it back. Now, if a person continually asks for money, then you don't need to just keep giving them money. There's usually some bigger issue that person's got to deal with. You know, you can help them by teaching them some of the things we're going to learn about. Or maybe that person, Adam talked about this in his, lessons last quarter. Maybe they've got an addiction that's sucking that money out of them that they need to deal with. So again, the main thing is, if you loan money to other people, all right. Co-signing, Proverbs 17:18. And there's several verses, but this is one. A man devoid of understanding shakes hands in a pledge and becomes surety for his friend. Some versions say not wise. One of them says stupid. You don't want to co-sign. Why does somebody need a co-signer? Because why? Their credit's bad. Bank won't loan them money. That ought to be a big warning sign right there, shouldn't it? Guess who pays it if they don't pay it back? You do. Can you imagine how that would destroy a relationship? I've heard numerous people calling a financial show, like a young lady will say she co-signed for her boyfriend's car, and he's not making the payments, and guess who the loan company comes after? Or even worse, they're not even together anymore. They said, oh, we're going to get married. It's not a problem. But nope, now they're broke up. He's got the car. He's not paying. They come after her. You can see how horrible that is, right? Imagine it's your child. Oh, I want to help my child out. I want to co-sign for him. I want to get that car. But let's say the child quits paying it, got the car. What do you think that does to your relationship? It makes it pretty rough, I think. So, it says plainly here to me, don't co-sign, and I would say these two things too. Don't make payments for people you aren't married to. Now, if you think you want to pay off somebody you're going to get married to's debt, okay, pile it up in a savings account. Then when you get married, it's no longer his or her debt, it's whose debt? Our debt. So that's an important thing to remember too. It's our debt now. Then you can pay it off. And finally, if you feel, like I said, if you feel you have to help someone, just give it to them. don't set up that loaning, borrowing relationship. So, any questions about debt and those kind of things before we go on? All right. I promised we'd talk about this, so let's get to it. Budgeting. Why budget? I alluded to a budget when we talked about debt, and we talked about how we're stewards of what God gives us to take care of. So we need to manage it wisely, right? Psalms 24, verse 1. The earth is the Lord's in all its fullness. We talked about it's all God's, right? We're just managing it for him while he's here, or while we're here, excuse me. And then Psalm 50 points out the same kind of thing. Verse 10, for every beast of the forest is mine, and the cattle on 1,000 hills. I know all the birds of the mountains and the wild beasts of the field are mine. So that's something we should keep in mind. We're stewards, so if we're the stewards of something, you remember I talked about how I was taught, if you're taking care of something or borrowing something from somebody else, you take care of it better if it was your own thing. So God allows us to have these things, so we need to do the best we can to take care of them. And part of taking care of the money we've been given is to budget. All right. It makes money my servant to do what God expects of me. We talked about that money is a good servant but a terrible master. In 1 Corinthians 4:2 talks about doing what God has required of us. Moreover, it is required in stewards that one be found faithful. You remember the parable of the unfaithful steward, how he got in all sorts of trouble because he wouldn't take good care of his master's money. So we're to be, good stewards of what we're given. It gives us discipline over our spending. We talked about that self-control thing. The budget helps give you a set of guidelines on how you spend your money. And finally, it could give us a plan to help pay down debt and increase our savings. Ben talked about the great detail that God gave Noah in building that ark so he could be successful, right? Well, to me, it's the same thing here. It's a detailed thing to do this, but it helps us manage our money to benefit us and ultimately be pleasing to God as the steward of that money. All right. Preparation. Work together. Both of you need to be involved in this exercise. Don't be the one spouse that says, this is how it's going to be, and take no input from the other. One spouse should not say, oh, you just handle it. You need to work together. In most couples, there's one that's the nerdy financial person, and there's one that's not. But you got to work together, or it's not going to work. There'll be resentment later or problems, but you got to work together to make it work. Compile all your sources of income so you know how much you got coming in. A lot of people, that's your paycheck. Old guys like me, pension, I'm very fortunate to have that. You got retirement savings. You get older, you get Social Security. So you got to figure out what's coming in first. What do you got to work with? I would tell you at this point, don't include like bonuses or overtime. It's better in my mind to budget off your base and then use that extra money as you need it to supply other needs in your life. So, first thing you need to do is look at what is called your regular monthly expenses. And I'm talking about things that you owe every month. Maybe you pay rent. Maybe you have a house payment. You got utilities. You got electric or gas. You got water. You got cable. You got phone. Maybe you don't. We have a well, so we at least don't have a water bill. But, those are things that you pay every month. So you kind of note these things. Other debt payments, car, credit card, furniture, and then those subscriptions again. That's the ones you really got to look for. Netflix, Hulu, YouTube, that monthly. I've seen people, Fruit of the Month Club. There's a really funny, everybody loves Raymond episode about the Fruit of the Month Club. Now, I don't know why. Now that this one store downtown has the Cake of the Month Club. Now, that sounds intriguing, but we haven't done that yet. But, you got to know what is going out on a regular monthly basis. First off, like I said, your regular monthly expenses. Then you get to regular non-monthly expenses. Well, what's that? That's stuff that you pay, but you don't pay it every month. Now in the city, I know you city guys, your trash bill I think comes every month. Where we live out in the county, we use a trash service and it comes every quarter, right? So you got to, make note of that. And you got to allow some in your budget each month, even though you're not paying it, to at least put it aside. Like our trash bills say $60 a quarter. So you got to stick $20 a month away to cover that. You got car insurance. Car insurance usually is every 6 months. Now, you can pay like an extra $1 a month and they'll do it monthly. And maybe that helps you budget better, so you might go that way. We actually do that. We pay monthly car insurance. Home insurance is usually yearly. That's when it gets a lot of people. You get up and there's your insurance and pays off, and it's usually a pretty nice little bill. So that's a good one to say, all right, I'm going to appropriate 1/12, because you got 12 months in a year, and put that aside each month so I don't get this big old home insurance bill and got to try to pay it. Property taxes. You pay taxes on your car, pay taxes on your home, same kind of thing, once a year. Try to space that out 12 months. And then Christmas and birthdays. Christmas is always December 25th. They don't move it around on you like, Easter is always a different time, or Thanksgiving might be a little. Christmas is always that time. Now, they used to do a Christmas club thing at the bank. I don't even think they do that anymore. But they used to have this neat little thing where they'd take a certain amount out of your paycheck, or you could put it in every few weeks and save it up. Well, they don't do that now. I wish they did, and maybe some places do that. But then birthdays are the same way. People's birthdays are always the same time. They don't move your birthday around on you. So again, you got to set aside maybe a certain amount a month to cover birthdays of people. All right, and then finally, you have, and I apologize, these are the best terms I could come up with, irregular routine expenses. These are things that you have to do routinely, but you don't quite always know what they're going to cost. Food, and I'm including cooking at home and eating out. Sometimes food prices change. I remember about a month into this COVID thing, I don't know if you remember, the price of meat shot up because a bunch of the slaughterhouses had trouble with COVID infections, and I think the price of beef tripled there for a while. Clothing, you might buy clothing different times of the year. It was always a big thing when I was a kid. I don't even know if it is anymore. We'd always go to Sears in August and buy our school clothes. Now, I don't know if people do that anymore, but there might be certain times of the year, and you might spend more for clothing one month than another. Gas, car repairs. You know how gas is one of the most fluid expenses. 1 week I drive by this place by the college and it's one price, and I can come home from church and it's shot up 10 cents just in the time we've been sitting here. You don't know but you're going to buy gas. Entertainment, I'm talking movies or maybe going to a play down here at the market house. I'm not talking about vacations, because those are something you almost have to save for separately, a certain amount a month. Miscellaneous, I always called this the Walmart category because that's where we bought a lot of our stuff. I'm talking about, light bulbs, batteries, all that kind of stuff, personal products, all those things you generally buy at the Walmart. You don't buy at the store. School, your kid comes home, I need a whole ream of notebook paper by tomorrow. How many's that ever happened to y'all? I need pencils. I need pens. We're going on a field trip next week. I need $10 for lunch. And then medical. And again, I'm not talking about the big expenses. I'm talking co-pays, or I'm talking prescriptions. You get to be my age and you have what's called maintenance medicines. I'm sure some of you have those where you have to take every day and you get them every month, routinely, or even over-the-counter stuff. So anyway, you just need to and that looks pretty daunting, doesn't it? You're like, man, that's a lot to keep up with and to research. But what you need to do to start to prepare a budget is start looking back over your bank statements, even for the past year. And you can do that a lot easier than you used to. You get these big old thick stack of paper. And now you go online and look at a lot of it. Figure out what you're spending, because you got to kind of know what you spent before to figure out how you're going to budget next. And so We'll stop there, and then we're going to start talking about how you do a budget and how to handle when things don't go quite like you expect them to with a budget. And I appreciate